Welcome to the Album Anniversary Podcast. Today's show is about Brave Faces Everyone by Spanish Love Songs. It was released February 7th, 2020, so it's celebrating a 5-year anniversary. Hi there. Before we start the show, I want to remind everybody I have started a Patreon, and I'm hoping people will go over there and sign up. It's totally free. I'm not doing tiers right now. I'm just trying to kind of see if people will join me over there for just a little bit more community. People keep on leaving social media. People come and go, and I want a place for kind of a little spot that I can call my own that would be able to, be kind of build that community. So again, there's no tiers right now. You just go up and you say join for free. It's the same content, although I'm going to try and think about doing extra content on Patreon just to see if I can get people over there. Maybe at some point I'll do some tiers. I don't know. But right now it's totally free. And actually, one of the things I'm really hoping people will do is I'm going to try and in the next couple of weeks get up a poll or some sort of like survey to kind of get feedback about the show. That's what I'd love. I'd love to hear what people like, what people don't like. What would people, want to hear extra of? If there's extra things that people do want to hear, I'd love to hear those. I have other interests. I have other things that are going on in my life. Whether it's just interviewing guests about just other random things, not about specific albums, whatever. I'm open to ideas, but I'm kind of hoping to do that a little. So again, you can just go to Patreon. If you search for the Album Anniversary Podcast, it comes up. You just look for the chickadee. That's the branding all over. Although maybe at some point I'll have to move on from that. But that's what it is right now because I want to keep on using it. So there you go. The Album Anniversary Podcast over on Patreon. Easy to find. All right. Thanks so much for listening to my little announcement. Let's get back to the show. Hi, I'm your host, Caleb, or Caleb the Spy on Twitter and Instagram. Every day on social media, I post about what I call album anniversaries. So on the Album Anniversary Podcast, we take a look at a classic album on the anniversary of its release date. In this case, maybe it's a soon-to-be classic. It's only 5 years old, but you get the point. This podcast is a chance to talk about why we love an album, why an album is important to us, and why you should check this album out. Albums on this show often focus on alternative rock, punk, and my strange obsession with ska. In the 90s, I was super into the Christian music scene, so that does come up often on the show. Today, I'm joined by Jared to talk about Brave Faces Everyone by Spanish Love Songs. But before we bring Jared in, I do want to kind of talk about something real quick. On this, in general on the show, I try and kind of edit out the swears. If somebody says one, I just kind of bleep it out. And I've tried to kind of avoid it in the songs. Really tough on this album. It's one of those albums. There's swears on it. So I'm still going to edit it out if, Jared or I let one go. But on the album, on the music, there probably will be some swears in it. So if that's something you're not comfortable with, you can always just hit the fast forward button if you still want to partake in the show. Otherwise, I do apologize. I try and edit them out. I don't have any problems with them, but I know some people do, so I try and do that. So just a heads up that if you're listening to the music this week, there might be some swears in there, and I'll probably put the explicit tag on this episode. So just a heads up. All right, with that out of the way, let's bring Jared in. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I've said it before. If it's a CCM related album, I never have a hard time finding a guest. But for some of these non-CCM ones, it can be a little struggle. And this is one that was on my calendar and I was excited to do it. So really glad you could be here. In fact, I think you were listening to it and I saw it on Instagram and I was like, hey, you want to talk about that album?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you reaching out because it's one that I really enjoy, and I don't have as many of these that are kind of recent and more current, even though it's 5 years old. We know it's the anniversary that I feel attached to like this, but this one caught me right away. So
yeah. Well, your first time guest, and so a lot of times with first time guests, I kind of just want to know like a little bit about that musical journey. Like, obviously you're here to talk about music, so it's important to you. We, I think, got to know each other through music and even like through a music related podcast. And so, like, were you raised in a house around music, or is it more something later in life?
Music was around always in my childhood at home, not being played. Neither of my parents play any instruments,
Sure.
but there was a lot of music around. I grew up in a pretty strict conservative Christian home. I was a
Sure.
homeschooled kid and eventually became a pastor as my dad went into full-time ministry. So what I remember, especially from when I was young, was my mom always playing Sandy Patty
Okay.
and then a lot of Southern gospel.
Sure.
So that was the kind of predominant music that my parents played in the house,
Sure.
with a little bit of oldies. And my dad liked old country, like Tom T. Hall and Charlie Pride, like that
Sure.
kind of thing. We'd flip to those radio stations in the car, but it was always around. It was a big part of it. And then I just found my way into what I cared about
Hmm.
really early, like 8 or 9. And it was some of the usual suspects from kind of the Christian music that was popular in the late 80s.
Sure.
DeGarmo and Key and Carmen were my initial favorites that were not something my parents were listening to that I picked out on my own, like
Sure.
the Pledge album. And then it just kind of took off from there. Where I was really interested in music. I took piano lessons for a few years, so
Hmm.
dabbled. Not I cannot play anything worth listening to, but enough, to know what a quarter note is and maybe pick out some notes on a scale, but nothing proficient, but just a little bit here and there. But so I've mostly just been a consumer of music, just someone
Sure.
really interested into it, and always had it around, and spent a lot of time and energy seeking it out and learning new music, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I'm assuming, I'm just going to make the assumption based upon the people I've gotten to know online the last couple of years. A lot of time in a Christian bookstore looking at covers going, I wonder if this is any good because you don't really know until you pull it off the shelf and listen to it.
Absolutely. It was a lot of that. And yeah, especially I think about it now of being a teenager without, we didn't have a lot of free spending cash. So I
Yeah.
would work little jobs here and there, but CDs were what, 15, 17, $18?
18. I remember 18 being the kind of the
Yeah, especially
standard
at the Christian
price.
bookstore.
Yep.
Yeah. So you were kind of going blind on a big investment,
Yep.
and have talked about this with some friends though. So even if it wasn't your favorite on the initial listen, you were going to keep going with that because you spent your
Yeah.
hard-earned $18 on that one you kind of picked from the cover, and it was like, these this band looks cool. I hope they sound good.
Yeah.
But either way, I'm going to listen to it a lot
Yep.
because I purchased it. But I think that helped, like you develop relationships to what you did purchase because we didn't have streaming or
Yep.
at that point in my life couldn't download music illegally, all those things. And then the Christian radio was what it was.
Yep.
So to branch out beyond that, you had to purchase some CDs but yeah, a lot of guessing
Yep.
for sure.
Yeah. Josh Balog was on the show and he told about like he would go to the Christian bookstore and he'd kind of pester the staff like, hey, you don't have a demo for this. Maybe you should open one. Should you open this?
Yes.
I think you should do a demo. Like you should have a demo out for this. And he'd like wear them down and eventually get them to like open stuff up so he could listen. And I think that's pretty hilarious. Like we never did that. We just kind of, we would often do the thing where we'd pull it off the shelf and it was like, okay, these three look good. I'm getting this one. You're getting that one. You're getting that one. And
Mm.
then we'll all swap. And sometimes you got the loser of the group and you had to go back and buy two more because you really wanted those other two, and sometimes you got the winner and it was like, yes, I won this round. Everybody's going to go back and buy the one I bought, and so we would do that a lot where we'd kind of, all right, you got that one. Let me check it out and I'll see if I like it.
Definitely relying on your network, if you want
Yeah.
to call it that, of friends or people who cared about similar things was really
Yep.
important to broaden your reach.
Yep.
My first exposure to like DC Talk, they're
Sure.
self-titled, was a friend who saw them open for DeGarmo and Key, bought the tape, brought it over, and I was like, oh. And then of course I dubbed it
Yep.
onto a blank cassette. So there was a lot of that
Yep.
to replicate or duplicate somebody else's so you could expand your own. So you had like the proper CDs or tapes that you had purchased and you had the cool cover art and the liner
Yeah.
notes. And then you had your kind of off-brand generic versions that you had recorded just to have additional ones to
Yeah.
have the full collection. Yeah, it was fun though.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. It's amazing how I kind of thought we had a real unique experience, me and my friends, like with that Christian
Hmm.
bookstore experience. And the more people I talk to, I've learned like, nope, that was a 90s youth group kid experience that like just a lot of people had. And I think it's pretty incredible. Like I keep on meeting people because you were raised in the South, I think.
Yep, for the most part.
And so it's like, yeah, like just, oh, you talk to somebody from Oregon. It's like, did the exact same thing. It's like, man,
Right.
alive. That's crazy. Just all over. And we all had a very, very similar, it's not the exact same, but really similar experience. So it's always interesting to me.
Yeah, the amount of crossover of the particularities of that sort
Yeah.
of thing is really impressive.
Yep.
And I've gotten really fond of thinking that, you were unique or alone or isolated, and then you find out like, no, I just have to go on the internet to find
Yeah.
other people. They're not in my neighborhood, so I'm
Right.
not necessarily talking to people 2 streets or 2 houses down that share these memories or these stories, but there's so many of us.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
thanks to folks like you, with CC, like the CCM Twitter, and just like all the different pockets in the Facebook groups,
Yep.
I think it's so much fun to reminisce and collaborate, or just recognize, oh, you did that too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, because the demo stations were huge, right?
Yep.
Anything that was
Absolutely.
available, you could pop in the headphones and like, oh,
Yep.
I can actually listen to this one
Then you
before I
you
buy it.
learned you learned not to trust those stupid posters. That does not sound like Nirvana, no matter how much that poster says.
No. And that's how you could log a lot of time in the Christian bookstore hogging one of those stations, because you're like,
Yep.
I got to listen to this thing all the way through. Sorry, I
Exactly.
can't go home yet.
That's awesome. Well, let's dive into this album. Let's take a total shift and not a Christian album at all. And
Not.
I know that this, again, a lot of the connections I have online are kind of people connected to the Christian music scene. So sorry to if you're hoping to just avoid that on this show. Sorry, we delved into it anyway. But great to hear that story. And so with that out of the way, I say we dive in and tackle this album.
On any given day, I'm a 6 of 10. Bed to desk to bar eyes on the floor. Still apologizing for the way I've been. Each breath more full of shit than the one before. Yeah, I know the negative consumes me. Guess I'm alright. Let the guilt pass right through me while my friends are taking dives off of cliffs, and I just worry about the songs I'll never write. It don't matter, they don't want to hear me on the other side. So let me ruin my guts tonight. Just let me
Great
ruin
Faces,
my
everyone.
guts
Again, this is what we're talking about by Spanish Love Songs, and again, released February 7th, 2020, which is celebrating a 5-year anniversary. And I know this will come up, but that date is poignant, in my opinion, because of what happened a month later. I think that absolutely plays into the impact for a lot of people from this album. COVID kind of hits. For me, it hit mid-March, in Minnesota, and our lives were forever changed. So it's again 5 years later, February 7th, 2020, and this was the album's third. This was the group's third album. I really messed that up. This was the group's third album. It appears, and we were just talking about this a second ago off air, but not a ton of information on this online, but it appears to be produced by Trevor, who does the bass, and Kyle, who played guitar on this. So again, that's kind of who it appears to be produced by. I probably could have. I have this on vinyl. I probably should have pulled it out and looked a little closer at the liner notes, but I didn't. You have yours too. What's your variant?
Dude. I think it's like a black splatter.
I have the exact same one, I think.
Do you? It's
Yeah, mine's red and black.
this one.
Oh, no, mine. So hold on. I'm going to grab mine. This is
Okay.
good radio, everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's black and white, but in the light, it looks a little more brownish, but outside of
Yeah.
it looks pure black.
I have. Oh, no, I do have that one. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
so yeah, I got.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the light this one looks different with it looks copper almost.
Yeah. Produced by Kyle, additional producer by Trevor. So, I mean, it really does look like they also did the engineering on it. It was mixed by a guy named Vince Ratty and mastered by a guy named Ryan Smith. I don't know who any of those people are. Well, I know who Kyle and Trevor are, but yeah, so done in house by Trevor and Kyle. And I think one of those guys, I think it's Kyle. I think he left the band after this, so I think this was his last album with the band.
Okay.
Good radio there. Me going to get a vinyl. That's how to draw people in.
No, I do believe just from the little bits I've heard of interviews is they're a pretty DIY outfit
Yeah.
of like really really make their own thing go.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think shows up in the
Yeah, I agree.
lyrics. Yeah, like it's very much present
Yes,
of
I
them doing
agree.
it their way. But
Yep.
yeah, they're interesting.
Yep. So it has three singles from this album, which two of them are well, actually all three of them are really interesting to me. So one, "Losers" is a single, and it was a released back in April of 2019. So that's like what 10 months before the album came out, they released the single, which in
Yeah.
this day and age isn't all that weird. You put out singles and then we're working on a new album or something like that. But yeah, so that was released back in April, and then Kick and Beachfront Property are other singles from this, which is just really interesting to me because there's just some other songs that I think are better. So it's just interesting that those two are the other two singles. I think "Losers," we'll get into songs, but those are three really interesting choices, partially because of the date and then partially the other two choices.
No, I completely agree with you where Losers up there for me, but the
Yeah.
other two I like,
Yeah.
but I don't have them as like my some of the top songs off the album.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
I was gonna say Kick seems personal. I don't know if it's firsthand personal, but it seems like
Yeah.
a real specific narrative, and maybe that's why.
Right.
Just the content of the lyrics
Yeah.
that maybe they feel strongly about it.
And I like Beachfront Property, but I like it because it closes side A. But
Hmm.
because it's a really good closer to side A, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's because it has a little bit of an epic feel, but it doesn't know if
Right.
that translates well to being a single. So
No.
that's the other part of it.
Yep. I agree.
As far as I can tell, it was released to very, very positive reviews. I think I went back and just looked through some reviews and I could not find too many ones that did not speak highly of it. So very positive reviews, and it charted pretty well. It reached number 61 on the Billboard charts, which again, for a little punk outfit, I think that's pretty impressive. So that's about all I have on this is positive reviews and charted fairly well when it was released. Well, those are our facts, so I say we jump in and let's tackle some of our questions here.
My dreams are quick, dry as cement, slipping through the tips of my fingers. Fill my pockets, cannonball into the black when I hear you say, it won't be this bleak forever. Yeah, right. It won't be this bleak forever. And I hope you're right. It won't be this bleak forever. Have you seen me lately? It won't be this bleak forever.
All right, so our first question every show is, how did you first discover this album?
In a very unusual way for me.
Okay, perfect.
So I actually learned so this album was my introduction to Spanish love songs.
Okay,
And I learned of the album and Spanish love songs through a beer podcast.
okay, that is an
Yeah.
interesting introduction.
So I'm a craft beer guy, nerd is fair to describe it.
Sure.
For a very long time, and would listen to this one particular beer podcast is really good called Malt Couture.
Okay,
But the host with a couple of his friends is a well-known beer blogger nerd, and they kind of have a comedy thing going on. But they have
Sure.
a beer news section of their podcast of like what's going on in beer, and sometimes it's like a funny trademark thing or something silly, but then
Yeah.
sometimes it's like something of note. And they're all located in California. And so on this one particular episode, he just said that this one brewery, Horace Aged Ales, which is out in California and is this really like nerdy artisan. They only make beers that aren't very profitable, but they do them really well, like
Sure.
imperial stouts and barley wines, and like that's it, and real limited runs. But that they were doing a collaboration with this band called Spanish Love Songs on a beer.
Right.
And that for the beer release, that the Spanish Love Songs would be there with these like screen printed vinyl, like a variant that were
Sure.
hand signed, and I think it was like 50 of them. So like this very exclusive thing. I can't find it. I went looking for it in advance of this to see like on Discogs, like what do these look like? I could not find anything about other than a post about the event saying that it would happen.
Sure.
So the host, anyway, I'm always looking for new music. I was like, huh, Spanish Love Songs. He said it was a punk band from California. And the host has similar music tastes. He's a little bit younger than me, but I've followed him on his social media for years. And,
Yeah.
he'll post stuff to his story and it's music in the background that I like. He's posted a Five Iron Frenzy song before. I mean,
Oh,
like total scene kid that played the bass in a punk band in high school and college. And so he said they were really good and they had the beer tie in. I was like, well, this is a mix of my interest.
right.
I need something new to listen to. Let me throw on this Spanish love songs. And so I did, and this was right after as the album was coming out. So I just clicked on this album basically
Sure.
because of that and immediately fell in love from line one,
Yeah.
basically. But it was all because of a mention on a beer podcast by someone whose musical taste I trust. And other than the unfortunate name, which makes the search for them a little bit harder sometimes,
Very hard.
I'm not
Yes.
looking for love songs in the Spanish language. But yeah, that's how I got turned on to this band and this album, and I got hooked and loved the follow-up album, and like consider myself a big fan of the band after that.
That's awesome. I heard about them a little more organically, I'll be honest. I really love a band called the Menzingers. I just
Hmm.
they really resonate with me. I really like them and the Gaslight Anthem. I love that like punk rock that makes you feel nostalgia for the 50s. I don't know, there's something about both of
Yeah,
those bands. They seem to be able to do that. And I'm not all that nostalgic for the 50s to be totally honest, but they both kind of have that feel and the Menzingers just kind of they're at their best in my opinion when they're, doing these fast songs. I think when they slow it down I don't love it, but when they keep it fast, keep it punk rock but keep it nostalgic, I think they're really great. So I really love the Menzingers, and so I think I was googling that, and there's a style of punk rock that they kind of always get uh, roped into, which is called orgcore, and it's like there's an old website called Your Scene Sucks, and it kind of is just
hmm,
making fun of all the scenes, and it's meant to kind of poke fun at all of them, but orgcore punk is one of them, and it's bands like the Menzingers and Alkaline Trio and Gaslight Anthem. And so I was just kind of messing around. I was like, well, who else? And Spanish Love Songs came up as a contemporary of the Menzingers, and so I was like, well, I like the Menzingers. Let's check these guys out. And so I was aware of Schmaltz, I think is how you say their
hmm.
previous album, and I had it, and I was like, this is good. I like it. It's not blowing me away, but yeah, I like this. I will continue to check out their music. But then I like lost track of them. So I'll be honest, I missed this album entirely. And I just don't know
Okay.
if it was the chaos of 2020 or what it was, but I totally missed this album entirely until No Joy came out last year. And I think I had maybe gone back and grabbed it, but I just had not taken that deep dive. And then I got No Joy last year, and that was like one of my top 5 records of the year. It blew
Same.
me. I love that album. I thought it was so
Hmm.
good. And so I was like, I have I have two of their other albums. I should probably take a deeper dive, and went back and bought it on vinyl because all of a sudden I was like, oh, this one's really, really good too. So that's kind of me, as I kind of knew about them, missed this, and then like I am on everything, I'm late on everything. Went back and kind of found them and attached to them kind of more recently. But again, I was aware and enjoying them, but just wasn't taking that deep dive that they deserved. So it's a real roundabout way of finding this band and this album.
And I guess I was a little late as well because when I was looking back to try to find, because that was what the memory I had was there was a
Yeah.
beer collaboration. I was like, was that correct? I need to confirm this before I make this claim. And that collaboration came out in 2022.
Oh,
So
okay.
I apparently stumbled onto it a couple years after the release. And then went back and listened to Schmaltz. And the same thing. I was like, oh, I like it, but it doesn't do what this album does for me.
I agree. I love and we'll get into it here in a second, but I love the step forward that this album is.
Yes.
That's my opinion. Is it's a step forward, and there's the elements that they add to it that I think really make it that. So
Hmm.
See you out past the breakers. Same smile. You had since you were 5. 'Cause we're just so fucking tired. We're explaining ourselves. We throw a pill down our throats. Or ourselves into the ocean. 'Cause half our friends are dead. The other half are depressed. In this budget red line. Polarized like it's
what is it that you love about this album?
Well, one, just musically, it's in my sweet spot
Yeah.
of like the style of music that is on almost an automatic yes for me. It's I mean, they're punk, but not in a traditional punk. Like,
Yes.
definitely. I mean, they have to be emo. I'm a soft emo boy,
Sure.
at heart, and so I also like angsty
Right.
lyrics and kind of the tone that this whole album conveys to me is right in it's in the middle of the Venn diagram of things that I'm like, yeah, that's for me
Yeah.
completely. So like the Menzingers, I think are a very apt comparison. I really like them.
Yeah.
They reminiscent of each other for sure. But the sound is right there. And then I like his vocal style
Yeah.
quite a bit. The singing to quasi yelling, but not true screaming, like how he does it. I thoroughly enjoy. And then the themes of this
Yeah.
album. I wouldn't call myself a sad person or a depressed person, but I really love sad, depressed art.
Yeah.
I like to feel those feelings, even if they're not true for me while I'm listening.
Yeah.
And this evokes so much emotion that's just like visceral or guttural to me. It's just like kind of raw, and
Yeah.
I like that kind of art that's very out like emo's the word, right? It's very
Right.
emotional and expressive. I can't find a better word because that's the one we use.
Yeah.
But just kind of puts it all out there and says it in big ways,
Yeah.
which I think this album does. Is like he throws haymakers.
Yeah. And I think that's why that release date is so important, because I think for
Yeah.
a lot of people this came out, and then there is this just whatever you think of COVID and what happened and good, bad, or fake or whatever, all that stuff. Irrelevant of that, it was a time of insane anxiety for almost everyone. Like there's just this sense of upheaval, and my life is like a lot of people are struggling to make sense of the world in 2020. Whatever you think about the events of 2020, there's a lot of that going on. There's the George Floyd stuff that's going on, and there's just this upheaval of 2020. And I think I've heard a number of people say that this was their album of 2020 because it is just so emotionally honest. I think especially and I don't think either you or I are millennials, although you might be closer than I. I'm technically Gen X, but I'm right on the line. So
Hmm.
I think for a lot of millennials, this just hit home. Like the theme, you mentioned the themes, like I'm moving back in with my parents because I don't have any money. Like that's a
Hmm.
thing, and he just hits on it so well, and it resonates with so many people.
Yeah, I think it captures the specific mood
Yeah,
of a specific time and place, but I don't think it's time bound or time based. Like I think 5 years from now, people can still listen to it, relate
yeah,
to it, because some of it is universal.
yep,
That is not deeply in that moment, but it captures. And I'm the same way. I'm either a millennial or a Gen X. I'm right on that line. Whoever
right,
decides, wherever year they make the cutoff, I go one way or the other. I'm either a young Gen X or an old millennial.
sure,
Um, and I think this album is written for people 5 to 10 or maybe a little more years younger than me
yeah,
of their stage in life and how they feel. But it seems to just like speak for a whole national,
yeah,
like it expresses all the frustration and hopelessness of
yes,
the state of things so strongly,
yep,
um,
yeah,
that yeah, it's easy to connect to on a feelings level.
yep. It's this idea of like, so I'm just going to read from I'm going to cheat and read from my notes, but like it's some of that heartbreak and the mental health struggles that became all of a sudden like there is something about it. Like in the last 5 years, people have become a lot more willing to say like I'm struggling with some mental health stuff, and like
Mhm.
all of a sudden that became a thing, and he's singing about those, and just those he sings about a lot of everyday challenges and everyday struggles that I think will make this feel more timeless than just straight 2020 sucks, because of all these things. I think just the stuff he's talking about is like I finally there's a couple lines on this that are killer, like where he's talking about like I finally got out on my own, and then I wrecked my car and they're coming for my laces, and like I have
Yeah.
nothing left. And he talks about like I am having a panic attack, not the fashionable panic attack, but like
Right.
a real one. And like That's really raw and really out there. And I think it just makes it really, really, really easy to connect with.
Yeah, it's very cynical that attempts to be hopeful but can't really buy into the own lie. Like I want to be hopeful, but I'm not. Like
Yep.
I there's so much of that of I look at me and then I look at the world around. Like I try to get outside of myself and look at the bigger picture, and that makes it worse.
Yeah.
Because the world at large is not good, and when I look at my situation, it's not good. So I don't see the bright. But I feel like it's a pushback against societal expectations.
Sure.
Of
Yeah.
like I'm so frustrated with what everybody's telling me, and there's clearly like this older folks are expecting more out of us, and they don't
Yep.
get it. But then there's also some level of refusal to sell out of like he's not talking about trying to climb the corporate ladder and like I'm just trying to cash in like everybody else.
Right.
Clearly to me, he's like without explicitly saying it, is like there's still this defiant attitude of not selling out even though it's not working out like
Yeah. Yeah.
at all that I like.
Yeah. There really is like something about, I don't know if it's something about his vocal delivery that just really does help, like it does help listeners connect with his emotions and really like, I think take them in and like almost even like process their own emotions. Like there is just something about that the way he delivers just really allows for this sense of like, not just to hear his emotions, but also like connect them with your own. Cause his vocal delivery is, I think it's perfect. I can point a couple flaws in this album at times, but it's none of them has to do with his musical or his vocal delivery. It's flawless in my opinion.
I agree. I love his vocals and the changes in the way he uses that to create that feeling that you connect with. So good.
There's something about his there's times where it feels like his vocals are shaking. Like it's not like and maybe he is doing that very much on purpose, but it just feels like there's this desperation at times in his vocals. Like this, I'm so stretched, and he communicates that in the delivery, which I think is I don't know, again, it's pretty amazing in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a huge release of all frustration. Like it's just exactly. Like, and what's interesting, I don't know if this fits in here, but when I did not realize he was a college baseball player.
Oh, really?
For a year, which I work in college athletics, so
sure.
Like I do academic support for college athletics, and like usually college athletes are confident folks.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and so I'm trying to imagine him on the mound.
Sure.
As a 6'6", he's a big guy.
He's a big guy. Yes.
So like you would think in that environment, a pretty intimidating dude, especially if he could throw. If he had the heat, it would be a guy I would think would see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But when I read an interview with him, he quit after a year and realized like what he wanted to do academically he wouldn't be successful at baseball with what he wanted to commit to academically. So he quit baseball.
Huh.
Like that was the choice he made. And even on I found his roster bio on Santa Clara, and it said in his goals, his major, that he was majoring in English and wanted to do a PhD was his long-term goal in English, which fits, I think, the tone so much more than baseball pitcher, right. 6'6", big arm up there. Usually you would think of a commanding president who kind of like is boastful or some swagger.
Yeah.
And you don't catch swagger in the lyrics. It's like, well, I mean, he flat out says so many self-deprecating, and not just self-deprecating, but self-attacking. Like, it'd be cheaper to die, right? Like,
there's a lot of that on this album.
Yeah. Yep. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that he was an athlete.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I knew he was tall. I've seen a couple of pictures of him, and I'm like, oh, I always think it's funny when you see band pictures, and like, I always make the joke about Poor Old Lou. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but like, Nick Barber and Scott Hunter are these huge football looking guys. And then the Sprinkle Brothers are these two tiny little guys. And they're like, it's just like, you can really see how big those other guys. I don't think they're that short, although I think they are kind of short, but like the other two guys literally look like tower above them. And I always think those are interesting when you look at pictures of bands, and somebody's just like, it's not who I thought you would be.
Right.
This is going to blend into each other a little bit with the question we just asked, but, why is this album something that's important to you? And if maybe it's not something that's important to you, is it something that you think will hold up? And I'll let you can answer either one of those, whichever is more relevant, you think.
Sure. I think the language of important is probably too strong for me. I don't think it's formative in a way where that I would categorize important albums for me, or things that I think had some impact on my life, that like maybe shaped how I viewed something or did something, or had some impact on me in a daily way. But I do think this will hold up.
Yeah.
Because, well, the fact that it seems like it was written for the time of its release in advance, but there's no way anyone knew a pandemic was coming. So it was just expressing something that so many people feel.
Yeah.
It's not an isolated experience to be frustrated. Because I listen to this album and I kind of laugh at myself, because I'm sitting here like singing along loudly, usually I do that by myself, where it's not really relevant. I don't actually feel this way for myself, but I love to sing these lyrics and feel what he's feeling. So it's not directly relevant. But just in a small way this week, like, I had to take the car to the shop. Got some disappointing news at work where I was hoping for a different outcome. And that was yesterday. And then I came home and the dog had pooped on the floor.
Right.
And it was just this whole feeling, right, of like the whole world's out to get me. Like, that's not actually true in my circumstance, right? It was just like, cars need to be repaired. Work is work. There's the ups and downs. And then dogs sometimes can't hold it. It was like, and none of these things they're all trivial in the big picture. But in the moment, I was ready to rage, and like kind of scream at the void and say it's all unfair and I can never succeed.
Right.
And I think that's what this album does. And then I think for so many other people, particularly, I really do think it's for those maybe a little bit younger. Who are going to resonate so directly in a way that I appreciate and I like, but I don't feel it as my own lived experience.
Yeah.
But because he articulates something that is so widespread, not just when this album was released, it's still true. And if a lot of the realities of life right now, with some inequalities and challenges with income and owning a home and supporting yourself, if those persist for a while, this is going to continue to resonate directly with so many people, because feeling like, hey, there's nothing, I'm doing what I can, but there's nothing I can do about it. Is not new, and it's not going to go away. And other people will feel good about being able to sing along with someone else who's voicing what they're feeling, especially as effectively as he does it.
For me, I think you've nailed it. That is why I think this will hold up and will be something that I think does get looked upon. Like, it's you're right. It's amazing that this came out leading into the pandemic and leading into all the other things of 2020. And there's no way they could have predicted that, but it feels so relevant. And not to get, I'm going to get a little political, and I really don't do this very often, but like, for so many young people who just continue to hear that their avocado toast is the reason that they can't buy a home, like, this is a big you to so many people who keep on telling them that. And that is what resonates with me. And I do own my own home. I mean, you're the same boat. Like, I've been very, very, very fortunate that, that we've been able to afford a home for our kids and stuff like that. But like, I can see this being one of those things that, unless, there is some change and some of those things shift and we do find ways to make life. I say this all the time because I will push back against my boomer family members who are like, I just don't understand it. And I kind of just feel like, yeah, I get it. Like you were making a lot less and things cost a lot less. And yes, there some income has grown a little bit with, the cost of things, not as much as it could have. But I think one of the big things is, and that he articulates it with the car line, I've gone back to that twice now, is like, I think there's a lot more of a razor's edge that a lot of young people walk that maybe I didn't have to walk. Where like if I made a mistake or my car broke down, it was a couple $100 to fix, where now it feels like, oh, it's $4,000 to fix it. And just that ability to build up any sort of cushion is just so much harder. Because I didn't have a cushion until I was like in my mid 30s. Like we were dirt poor until then.
Same.
But even if something would have gone horribly wrong, we both came from families that had money. So we kind of had a cushion to fall back on, even though we really never had to need that. But like, it just felt like, yeah, even if one of the cars died, there was we could afford to potentially replace it. We're like now, like I do worry about how my kids are going to afford even something as simple as a crappy used car. Like,
yeah,
and so like, I just think those sorts of things is what's going to make this resonate, because he touches on so many of those, again, everyday things that just can, drag you down. And I think that's why this has the ability to hold up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right, exactly right there. And he's not just saying, "Hey, it's hard right now." The tone of the album is, and I also have no confidence that it will get better. Like I'm not working towards something, which is different even from, I think, our age, where I took out student loans to go to college, but I went to a private college and I worked and had some loans and some help with the scholarships and Pell Grant and whatever. But I've never been challenged to pay my student loan bill. It wasn't crippling. It was never crippling. It was doable. It was reasonable.
Yeah.
And so I had access to that and didn't make a lot of money early in our career, but I think it elicits a lot of empathy from me of we own our home, but we live in rural North Carolina and we bought it almost a decade ago. And I'm completely that meme where we refinanced when everything hit.
Yeah.
And we're locked into that really good rate. And then I see what people are facing trying to buy their first home. And I was like, if that was my reality, I wouldn't own this home.
Yeah.
If that was the circumstances. And so I think even if it's not directly relevant, it elicits a lot of empathy if you have compassion and care about it being unfair or not right for other people. So you can appreciate, like, instead of lecturing somebody on their spending habits with minor purchases, avocado toast and a coffee here or there, which is the bright spot in their otherwise bleak day, as I think he says many times. Like, you can be empathetic to, man, this is tough, and and just like no confidence that it will change. Where I think when I was in my 20s or we were early married, and there was a confidence that as we kept working, it would improve.
Yeah.
And he articulating, I don't think it's going to matter in 10 years that it's going to be any different than right now.
Yeah.
And not for lack of trying.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I think, and a lot more artists have become a lot more open about their mental health, but like, I do think that's going to be something that also helps this stay relevant and stay kind of help to hold up. And I struggle with anxiety. That's my big struggle. I've had panic attacks that have left me trying to breathe. And I have had some pretty deep spots where, if anybody knows me, they know I will go through bouts of insomnia that are directly related to my anxiety. My record is I went 11 days with 9 hours of sleep. So I mean, cow. I can really go through it when I really get anxious. Recently I switched jobs and I was, for a while I wasn't sure what the job was going to have, and I went through a month where I was sleeping about 2 hours a night, and that's just, even with meds, I power right through those suckers.
Man.
Your meds can't knock me out. I'll find a way to stay awake. And so I can resonate with some of his anxiety, and that's the big one. I don't ever feel like I've struggled with any sort of depression, and so I can't relate to that as much. And I can't imagine adding that on to the anxiety. The anxiety is enough. But I think his honesty about the mental health stuff also makes this hold up. And I can relate to some of that. Less so some of the, like you said, like the total like hopelessness. I don't feel that.
Yeah.
But like it's really easy for me to spiral. Like I'm not going to get a job, then I'm never going to get a job, and then we're going to lose the house, and it's all going to be over. And it doesn't matter that we've got a little bit of a savings. It's over. It's over. And like my wife's like,
Right.
you need to stop. That is enough. Like settle down. It's like, okay. But like, it's so easy. And so I think that is another thing that I think is going to help this album kind of stand the test of time. Just his honesty, which again, isn't anything overly new, but again, the way it's done and the way it's delivered, I think make it really easy for this to stand up.
And he doesn't like resolve it with some cheery message.
Yeah.
Which I think would make it a little more corny and maybe dismissed. He just
Yeah.
leaves it of like, nope.
Yep.
I think of this is completely not a music thing and unrelated, but Ta-Nehisi Coates. I don't know if you've read any of his writings, but he writes about race in America. He wrote for
Sure.
the
Oh
Atlantic
yeah,
for
yeah,
a
yeah.
while.
He wrote Captain
Yeah.
America for a while.
Yeah, and then he did the Black Panther.
Sorry,
comic
I'm a
book.
comic book guy, so
But he was asked in an interview once of like, do you have hope that it will change? And he said, no,
yeah.
racism's never go. And you could tell the interviewer was just they didn't know where to go because no one says that, right? You're not supposed
Right.
to say that if you're any sort of activist, if you're paying us bring a spotlight, and I think that's maybe even to like some past periods in our country where there were like dark moments. You think of the civil rights, like, this is a complete different context, but like there was always this bright shining beacon
Yeah.
that we were marching towards somehow.
Yeah.
And now there's kind of like in this album, just kind of a feeling of like we're not marching to any there's no bright light. There's no light.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally no light. Like just anxious today, anxious tomorrow, probably anxious until the day I die seems to be what he's feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's more honest that way. Like he's
Yep.
telling the truth about how he feels. So it doesn't matter if he's right. He's at least
Right.
being honest.
Yep, I agree.
To hear about you anymore. I know. If every city is the same, doom and gloom under a different name. Maybe we should find our home in one. We argue and assign the blame. Now I get it, I must feel the shame. Count on one hand all the good we've done.
We've touched on a couple tracks here and there, and I'm really excited because I feel like I have some stuff to say. But what are some of your favorite tracks from this album? And I know it's really hard not to say all of them, but if you have to, you have to.
So it is a strong album where I don't feel compelled to skip things. Like I'm
Yes.
quite content to listen all the way through.
It's
I
a
don't
good one
think
for vinyl because you can
Yes.
go the whole way through.
So there's no songs where it feels like, oh, that's filler or
Yeah.
that could have been left out. I think they're all good. I think my favorite is the opener, Routine Pain, like from the jump. It's definitely one of my favorite tracks, and I think it is my favorite track. And that 1-2 punch of that straight into Self-Destruction.
Yeah.
I really like those two songs, but I think in the opener, like he just said, he tells you what the album is about in the very first line, so
Yeah.
you know immediately. And if that line's either going to suck you in, and you're like, yes, I like this, or if that turns you off, you know how you're going to feel about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
he just puts it out there at the very beginning. But the whole that song particularly, I really like the feeling it conveys, and the lyrics are smart,
Yeah.
and biting.
Yeah.
But right into Self-Destruction, which I think kind of carries it into. So I love the 1-2,
Yeah.
Losers and Losers too. I like those
Yeah.
a lot. And then I think it closes really strong with Brave Faces Everywhere.
Yep.
Like, and I like how they choose to close it and bring some callback lyrics and bits and pieces of other parts of the album to finish it out.
Yeah.
But I think those, and I can say more, I'm sure, as we talk about them, but those would be the highlights for me if I'm narrowing it down. But I do think it's a strong, full album that they did not include something simply to get to a number they were looking for, to fill it
Yeah.
out, to call it an LP or whatever.
Yeah.
It all matters.
Yeah. Well, it's only 10 songs, 40 minutes, and
Hmm.
so this is my ideal. I really hate the 14, 15 song album. I don't need it. I give me 10
Right.
songs that every single one of them is good. Like that is that I wish this is actually my my biggest complaint with hip hop albums is for some reason there's this
You're
need to
right.
make them 110 minutes long, and I just feel like guys, like give me 10 songs so that when that last song is done, I'm just going, I want more. I want more. Give me more. And that's what this album is to me, is it gets done and you're ready for more right away. And so, yeah, I love that it's that 10 songs, 35 minutes. That's actually my wheelhouse, but I'll give them the extra five because they're elements that they add to punk rock make it worth the extra 5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah. And I agree. Routine Pain is it's a killer opener. It says what the album is going to be about at about that 1 minute mark when the album when the it just opens up musically it opens up, it starts firing all on all cylinders. Like yeah, for me it's one of those, it's a moment where you're just like, oh, okay. And I think this is where you within that first minute and a half you see the progression from Schmaltz. Like it's there.
Yeah.
Whatever they figured out, they put it there in the first minute, and you're like, oh, this is different. And then I think they carried that over onto No Joy. I think they kind of found their, I want to, I'm saying formula, and that's going to sound like I'm being harsh. I'm not. Like they found this mix that works and they show it off in the first minute and a half, and it's amazing.
I think you're right there about the formula, and I completely agree that that is not a criticism.
Yeah. Yep.
And it doesn't feel lazy or unimaginative. They just seem really good at it, and it's really effective each and every time. Where their song structures are great, and like right at the beginning, where it's his vocal is the most prominent with just
Yep.
like a little bit of guitar behind it, and then it builds, and then it gets louder and faster. But then they fit bridges into all their, like they
Yep.
do something similar. They repeat it almost all the way through the album, but I never get tired of it.
Yep.
There's never a moment where I'm like, I've heard that already. It works each time. And I think the lyrics are so strong
Yep.
that you're focused on what he's saying, and that really helps too, because
Yep.
even though there's some consistent themes through the whole thing, each song is interesting enough with what he's saying on its own.
Yep.
But the fluctuations between just him and no music or just an instrument or two are powerful. And then as it swells and gets louder and
Yeah.
you just feel bigger. And as an album, I didn't say this of what I appreciate about it. I should have. This is an album to me that needs to be listened to loud.
Yeah. Yep. It's
Every
it's hard
time
to
I
listen to
listen
it
to
quiet.
it, I want to turn it up so loud. I think it's a great album in the car
Yeah.
where you can roll the windows down, turn it up really loud, and at least in my situation, sing or scream along very poorly, but it's so loud that no one's going to hear you. It's probably best
Right.
done alone
Yeah.
for me, but you can get all of it out with him or with them. I mean, it's the whole band. I keep saying him. He's the
Yeah.
lyricist and the art and the vocalist, but they repeat what they are doing, but every time it feels fresh and good.
And I think they do little things, like I've noticed on this that a lot of times, and it's not every song, but a lot of times the second chorus is slightly different than the
Yep.
first chorus. It has like three or four extra lines. So I think they do those sorts of things to keep it feeling like it's not just verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Like they kind of seem to, they throw little things in there that make it that, yes, it's still, these are all still mostly, 4 minute punk rock pop song. Not pop, that's not the right word, but like, 4 minute, there's kind of the 4 minute songs, but they do little things to kind of keep it, keep enough variety in them that it feels fresh every time.
Well, and you said pop, and I agree. It's not exactly pop, but there's something in the recipe that they've created that's
Yeah.
very accessible.
Yes. It's a much better
So
word.
it's because I tried to figure out how to say this as well without misleading because they're not pop songs,
Yeah.
but they're songs that you can sing along to quickly
Yeah.
and you can catch on with. And I think they like modulate your feelings very well.
Yeah.
And they do the screaming to a point where it never becomes so much where you have to kind of be into that
Yeah.
to appreciate it. And I would say this is a band where they're decidedly punk. I think that's the right
Yeah.
description of them. But if I'm playing them in my house, my wife and children share different music opinions. They have different tastes than mine, and they generally refer to what I'm listening to is that terrible music where they scream that dad likes. I don't think this ventures into that territory that would turn them off.
Right.
And somehow, even as it gets louder and he screams more, it never gets to that intensity where if you're not into that style of music, they somehow dial it back down and they manage that intensity and that feeling where you never get tired of it and they give you breaks when you need it.
Yeah.
I feel like because the emotion is so strong. And
Yeah.
then by the end, it's like I think the second to last track, they just kind of like smooth it out
Yeah.
so that they can finish well and you're not fatigued with listening. It's
Yeah.
really well put together.
Yeah.
I
I
think of
agree.
how you feel the experience of listening to the whole thing.
Yeah. And you said that, it's something that you can quickly start to sing along with. Like that, I think they bring that really strong into Self Destruction, the second song. Like he's like, it won't be this bleak forever. Yeah, right. Like that's a really, like, quickly you can sing along. And like he changes it. It doesn't always say that, but like that line right there, they end up repeating that enough where you can kind of start to sing along. And then like that kind of hooks you in. And like, I think Generation Lost then has the phrase, the fashionable panic attack. So there's like those first three songs, there's something about each one of them that I think really, really makes like all of them really stand out, so that you're three songs in and then they go to Kick, which was one of the singles, and Beachfront
Hmm.
Property. I mean, they go into the three singles at 3, 4, and or at 4, 5, and 6. So I mean, it's got three great songs to start, and then again, Kick is song 4, Beachfront Property is song 5, which closes side A on the vinyl, which is, I think it's a great closer. Again, maybe not a great single, but it's a great closer to side A. And it kind of makes you want to run over and flip it over for my favorite song on the album, I think, which is Losers. And that song is so good. And so to start side B with that song is pretty amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're not heavy songs, but they are heavy hitters.
Yeah.
And so much of it has to do with his lyrics. Like you said, every song has a line
Yep.
or a phrase that the way he says it, it's either just like, wow, so raw and blunt.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to say that, you know? And there's snark, like it won't be this bleak forever. Yeah, right. It's like,
Right.
I'm trying to say the thing you're supposed to say, but I can't even keep a straight face while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
You know, like
Exactly.
I'm trying to put on the positive, like, hey, it gets better. I can't do that. That's not, I don't even believe it. It's not who I am. It's not going to get better, guys. It's just
Yeah.
awful. But there is some humor in this,
Yeah.
I think, in the snarkiness, and there's sarcasm that's present
Yeah.
there. And I would argue like we get to a place of there's some hopefulness in here.
Yeah.
Like it's not strong and it's not cliche. It's not kumbaya around the fire, but there's a bits and pieces of like maybe it's not hopefulness, it's like resoluteness that I'm gonna continue forward.
I think that's what it is. Like
Yeah.
it's brave faces, everyone. Like that's
Right.
it. That's how they end, is like, hey, this, it won't be this bleak forever. Yeah, right. But what are you gonna do? You're gonna put on your brave face, and we're gonna keep on fighting. I mean, that's how I feel like it. That's the hopefulness it tries to end on. It's not necessarily that it's going to get better, but what are you gonna do? We're gonna fight. We're gonna put on our brave face, everyone, and we're gonna keep on pushing.
There's a lot of you're 100% right. There's a lot of like it is what it is, so we have to make it what it can be
Yeah.
because it's not going to happen for us. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like we have to find whatever the joy is, which ironically then they go to the next album, which I saw that he said is love songs, but Spanish love songs kind of love songs, so they're still
Right.
kind of depressing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But they're good. But yeah, I agree. Like even the Brave Faces, everyone is kind of like a fake it till you make it. Like what else can I think there's a lot of powerlessness
Yeah.
in here of like we all know it's bad, it's this, it's that, but what can we do? I can't.
Yeah.
Even the little stuff of like I can't even buy coffee without oppressing someone,
Right. Yeah.
which I love that line, and like a to me it ties back to Schmaltz. I think where like the haircut, like how could I can't even get a haircut that hasn't been co-opted by Nazis. Like I'm just trying to get a haircut, man, and now I'm a fascist.
Right.
Like there's enough real problems of I can't pay my mortgage. I live with my parents, and now my haircut is problematic. My
Yeah.
coffee, like the one like moment of brief joy in the morning that's satisfying is also I'm bad. I'm
Yeah.
a bad actor in this event too, which
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of fatigue and exhaustion here that we can all relate to of like trying to live well in this world and feeling
Yeah.
like every time I do something good, I get yelled at because
Yep.
like it's my coffee choice now. Now it's my
Yeah.
coffee, which I feel like I shouldn't have to have like a strong feeling about how I purchase coffee. Like it's kind of me reading into it.
Right.
But like you should be able to just like brew a cup of coffee and like it for what it is, but now it's a symbol of oppression.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm complicit because I bought it.
there's a I've said this before, like it's I haven't actually said this on the show. This is a whole new take. I don't do a whole lot of new takes on the show because I just say the same things over and over again. But like you can't fight for every cause. Like
Right.
you'd be so exhausted. There's and that's tough. Like I remember somebody got mad at me because I wasn't like super passionate about this cause, and I was just kind of like, I'm sorry. There's a 7,000. I mean, there's so many causes that I don't have the money to help them all. And even if I did, I'd be exhausted from it'd be a full-time job just to fight for every last one. And like, I think that's one of the things that I realize is there's things that I'm really passionate about. And there's like, oh, you're not passionate about that? That's okay. Because I get it. Like there's so many things. And sometimes for some of us, just getting through a month is enough, enough to tackle without having to take on 20,000 causes. So yeah, I totally get that idea of like, oh, even my coffee has oppressed someone and now I feel bad. Like at some point you got to let some of these things go and just yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah.
buy from Target, or I'm gonna get this from Amazon even though I don't love Amazon. I'm gonna
Right.
get it from them because I don't have the time to go to a real store. So here it is. It's what I'm doing.
And I live with my parents. I can't go to the local mom and pop artisan
Right.
shop or whatever to buy the ethically sourced, like not because I don't want to, but like there's also
Yep.
a reality of I can't, what, I think he's saying and I think exhaustion and fatigue are a big part of this,
Yeah.
of like,
Absolutely.
I'm just tired, man,
Yeah.
which I think shows up in the very first song
Yeah.
where, just like saying, I want to let me ruin my guts tonight.
Yeah.
And, I put in my notes, are you an Against Me fan at all?
I mean,
Have you listened to them?
I have listened to them a little bit, but I missed them because I think they were later, and then I just
Okay.
haven't gone back as much.
So I don't know if you know the album New Wave or the song Thrash Unreal, which
I
was a
don't.
big song. And this is, I'm gonna guess 2004 to 2006, somewhere in there. And
Okay.
they're from Gainesville, Florida. That's where I went to grad school, so I love them anyway. Um, but I love that record, and it's like it was like in Dan Ozzi's book about the emo scene. It was like the last major label emo
Okay.
contract. But Thrash Unreal is about this person who there's the lyrics in that are like if she wants to dance and drink all night, there's no one that can stop her. She's gonna
Hmm.
go till the house lights come up on the floor and her house lights come up and her stomach contents spill out on the floor.
Hmm.
And to me, it like I feel the exact same, and it's got the energy of this song and
Yeah.
this album of that same thing. And it's this story of a woman who's kind of like, just life has dealt her a bad hand. She's making the choices she has to make to get
Sure.
by,
Yeah.
but people look down on her. But right now, she just wants to go drink and forget. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of that song of like, hey, we all just worked all week. It's Friday night. Everyone wants to forget responsibility and drink, even though we know the end result, she's stomach's gonna spill onto the floor.
Right.
And I feel like he's saying the same thing of like, let me ruin my guts tonight, where it's like This is not out of control, reckless kind of substance use. This
Right.
is, I know what's going to happen, but I just want to drink
Right.
or whatever it is that's going to ruin his guts tonight. Like, I know I'm going to feel bad at the end of this. I know it's not good for me, but all of everything of my regular day-to-day stuff is too much. So right now, I'm just going to do this thing that I know is not positive.
Right.
That's at least the way I interpret it, and I can resonate with that. There's some times where you just like, if you drink alcohol, I do, where it's like, yep, I'm drinking more than I should tonight. I'm
Yeah.
going to have a headache tomorrow.
Right.
Because like at my age, I'm like, I'm an adult. I know how to make good choices, and I know where bad choices land. But there are times and periods or moments where you're like, I'm going to make the lesser choice and
Yeah.
live with the repercussions or the consequences. And that's the feeling I get from this song, which it brings me right back to Against Me's Thrash Unreal. I feel like
Hmm.
it's the same experience or energy that they're expressing.
Yeah.
But that very first line where he's like, any given day I'm a 6 of 10. It's like,
Yeah.
geez, that one is it's so good because it's so cutting of like, oh, that's to use their language, bleak. That is
Right.
dark, man. From the
Yeah.
beginning, it's dark and it's not hopeful, and then he's right into it. It's just like the way it sounds when he says, "Let me ruin my guts tonight," that's the moment to me where I roll the windows down, turn it up, and scream that along.
Yeah.
I love that part of this song.
Yeah. I have to mention the closer because I always mention the closer on every because I love closing
Yeah.
songs, and I think Brave Faces Everyone is a perfect closer to this album. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change a thing. Sometimes I get frustrated if I'm like, "Oh, I'd rather move this," but I also love you don't see this too much anymore where the closing track is the title track. That's kind of
Yeah.
that's a pretty unique thing. I think it happens, but sometimes it's like there's a line from it that maybe becomes the name of the album, but I can't think of too many other albums where the closing track is also the title track, and
Hmm.
it's a perfect close to the album, I think. And just the way it also, it's got some good crescendo, but then the way it kind of goes back to and ends with just kind of his voice and a pretty quiet instrumental. It kind of ends the way it starts, and it's this real great dynamic and dichotomy, I want to say, but I'm not good at English, so maybe that's not the right word. But like, it's really great the way those two songs
Hmm.
feel the same. It kind of starts where it ends with maybe slightly different messages, but it's really cool to me that they feel like they complete this whole piece, this whole collective good of an album.
It's a really good period at the end of the story.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, and I feel like if you listen all the way through from beginning to end, so you experience the whole thing, you get to the last notes and it quietly ends, and you can kind of like let the breath out. You're like,
right.
oh, I like it feels right in the way it tapers
Yeah.
off and simmers down after so much. And even I saw where he was asked what his favorite song, Dylan Slocum, the lead singer and lyricist, was asked what his favorite song on the album was, and then he named this one, "Brave
Mm,
Faces Everyone," is his favorite, which makes me think like all the way up through this, he gets all of his feelings out. And then Brave
sure.
Faces is like, and this is where I end up after
Mm,
all of that expression, after all that processing, after all of, what it is about existence and life and what I believe or don't believe in.
yeah.
This is where I'm at. Brave Faces, everyone, let's do it.
Yeah.
Which does give it a hopeful uptick, even as it quietly comes to a close. But
Yeah.
it's well crafted, this album.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I like I've got so many notes of like individual lines or just like things that he's trying to express. I could keep going. I could make notes on each one.
You
Yeah.
listed the highlights for you, and I was like, oh, that's my list exactly. Like
Is
it
it?
was pretty crazy. Yeah. Like my list is routine pain, self destruction, kick. I do like that song. Losers
Yeah.
two, brave faces everyone. Those are my favorites. I would also say beachfront property because it does close outside A so well, and I love the line
It
from
does.
Generations Lost. So I basically have all of them but like if you look at my notes, the little stars are the ones that I'm like, these are ones I definitely want to include in the show notes or in the show as kind of the breaks. So yeah, so it's a very, very similar list.
Yeah, I love your note about losers of holy crap with all the exclamation points. Like
Yeah,
my just so I made some notes on it where, it's just so dark where my bleak mind says it's cheaper just to die.
yeah,
Just like the economic reality of trying to function where it's like, man, this is all too much. I could just not be alive and that would
yeah,
be more economical, which is so cold
yeah, yeah,
and spreadsheety. Like it's like, man, that's turning life into an Excel file, which is
yeah,
awful, right? Like I mean, we listen to music, which means we hope for more than an Excel spreadsheet of life. I think that's what that means.
yeah,
Um, and then they add in, it gets harder, doesn't it? It's just like it's not going to get better; it gets harder. Like you
yeah,
guys aren't, and we're mediocre, we're losers forever. Gosh, like it makes you feel. I think from where I sit, it makes me feel so bad for people just a little bit behind me, age
yeah,
wise,
yeah,
in their career that don't have some opportunities that I had. And like, God, that is tough to feel this way that like we were just dealt a bad hand and we can't win with this thing. It's
yeah,
not going to get better. And then yeah, not to I don't want to make it a political thing, but like with our current reality of where we're about to be next week, like man, we are not making progress at this
yeah,
point in our
yeah,
like it doesn't, at least to me, doesn't feel like we're making progress. And we're like we go to school and learn to be proud of our history and all of the changes we made, and then now there's a generation of people who's like, are we the ones that go backwards?
right.
Is our footnote in the history books the part where we stalled out or reversed instead of we love to tell a story, at least about the United States, of just like this continual, gradual climb to greatness.
Yeah,
And I think for uh, whatever millennials, younger millennials, into whatever's next, they just don't feel like it's going to be great for them at all.
yeah, yeah. I think that is an overwhelming feeling. Like I'm trying really hard not to put that on my kids. Like I don't
Hmm.
want them to have that hopelessness because
Right.
it's really easy for them to catch it when like, and I'm honest with them about like, yeah, we're gonna figure out ways for mom and dad to help because we have 4 kids. So, and we're a single income household. So,
Yeah.
like we don't have a ton of extra. So it's like, yeah, we're gonna make this. We'll see how we can help, but we'll always be here for you. And yeah, we're gonna have to plan well and make good choices, and that's the important of good choices. Because yeah, I think that kind of goes back to that idea of like I feel like we had a little more freedom to make bad choices and we could recover.
Hmm.
Where like the current generation, I just don't think they do. I think it's one or two bad
No.
choices and they're sunk, and it's 20 years of climbing out of it.
Yeah, I think just our age going to college and being in your 20s was all about hopefulness.
Yeah,
It
yep,
was just like optimism.
yep,
And now it seems to not be optimism
yeah,
for a large subset, and there seems to be a stark dividing line. Like it's either nothing but good in your future or nothing but like
right,
I don't think it's going to work out.
yeah,
And yeah, such a different experience.
yeah, for sure.
Says this is all you get. I've been all this time, but all you'll find is it gets harder, doesn't it? It gets harder, doesn't it? It gets harder, doesn't it? It gets harder, doesn't it?
Now this one, sometimes I ask the question, I'm like, it's 20 years later. Nobody's checked this. They haven't
Yeah.
checked this album out. And you feel kind of silly. Like I did like Weezer's The Blue Album. And I was like, this is where this question really falls apart. If nobody's heard this album 30 years later, it's their problem. And they found it in my random little podcast. But I will say, a lot of people listen to the show are kind of CCM related. And so, and this is only 5 years old. There is a chance I kind of missed this. You came to this a little late.
Mhm.
Like somebody missed this 5 years later. we both wanted to talk about this album because we think there's things to say here. So, and I know you end up repeating yourself a little sometimes because we've already talked about all the great things we love about this album, but why should somebody go back and 5 years later check this album out?
Well, I think it's important that they're a current active band. So
Yeah.
you
Oh, yeah.
can listen to their music and get a chance to see them perform it and participate in what they're doing now.
Yeah.
And, as an album anniversary podcast, a lot of it is looking backwards, right?
Yep.
So those are not opportunities that exist if you stumble into an album you haven't heard and you really connect with it. You're not going to have the chance to participate in whatever it is they're doing. This is an
Yeah.
active band. This is part of their catalog, but they're current. So it gives you context. Like, it's a good album. If you like punk music
Yep.
that is singable and accessible, this is not off-putting, abrasive,
Yeah.
controversial punk that's designed to other people and make it hard for you to listen. This is music that welcomes people in, I think, are like musically
Yeah.
it's melodic, it's easy
Very.
to sing to, so it's an enjoyable experience from there. But I think they're good at what they do. The
Yep.
lyrics, like he's smart in his writing. It's resonant feelings that it may not be present all the time, but we've all had our moments where we can
Yeah.
feel this way. And to to deviate a little bit, this is all kind of how I look at the Psalms. If this is going to get weird for a second, but I used to struggle with some of the Psalms of like dashing the babies on the rocks and that sort of talk.
Yeah.
But now I look through it of like, he was expressing how he felt in the moment. Maybe he didn't really mean it. That's just how
Right.
he felt when like he was in a place where like I want bad things to happen to other people,
Yeah.
because it's not going my way right now. And I think we can all relate to that. And I think this album does a good job of that sort of thing of like when you feel like things are against you and it's just not working out and you're looking around and it seems like other people have it together or things have been in their like in their corner in their favor and you're somehow missing the boat and you're on the outside looking in. If that's just a moment or someplace you feel like you're in right now, it's easy to connect with the emotions of this. And so,
Yeah.
and then it's easy to sing along. So it's not hard to like the music. So I think, and then they're growing as a band. So if you like this, you have more opportunity to listen with them and see what they're doing. Because
Yeah.
we've brought up No Joy. I think you did
Yep.
specifically, but I think No Joy takes a new angle. They
Yep.
kind of sound like the Killers to me in a good
Yep.
way
I
on
loved
No
it. I
Joy.
loved it.
It does not sound like this album.
Yep.
So, but it's very connected. Like if you become a fan of the Spanish love songs, you'll have more to discover.
Yeah.
So if you like this, you can go backwards to Schmaltz and see kind of the roots of what led to this. A little more unpolished and raw and
Yep.
not as good maybe. Like they're earlier in their songwriting career. And then No Joy is the next step beyond this where they're exploring some different themes and some different musical styles, but it sounds very mature and cool.
Yeah.
So I think to me, check this out because if you like it, then there's more waiting for you. And you could catch a show and you could follow along and see what's next. And as they release a new album, and that's fun. I'm going to guess a decent amount of your audience and listeners may be in our age range.
Yep.
And we can get
That's what
stuck.
Spotify tells me.
So we could all be guilty of getting stuck and listening to what we've been listening to a long time because we really like it. But I think we should all continue to explore, today's version of going to the Christian bookstore and listening to the demo. And this is good new music that has the potential to keep giving you more because they're still writing and they're still touring. And so
Yeah.
you can catch this wave and continue to ride it and not just appreciate this album.
Yeah.
So that would be my
absolutely.
push.
I agree with all that. And I think for me, if you want to listen to a cathartic album, like you can have this emotional experience with, this is a great album to do that with. And yeah, you may not, every last one of these emotions may not be your emotions to them. Like you may not feel the exact same way, but like I think you can have that. And I think there's something really cool about that you can have this, you can have a moment with this album. And I think you can kind of have this, like, again, cathartic moment with this album because it's just such a, it over and over again. It does that. It delivers that. And I think that's something unique. And you don't get that with a lot of albums, especially me. I'm not really an emo kid. So that's saying something for me to kind of push for that. Been doing a lot of emo albums on this. This will be like my third in a month of like emo adjacent albums. I don't know what's happening to this show.
Keep it going. I love it.
Don't you know you were born into a poor man? Don't you know that you're gonna do yourself in? And you'll always wake up tired, because there's nowhere we go from here. They'll say that these are our exciting days, at least until they ask our age. Now I'm just a walking tragic ending. Fuck, I don't want.
Well, that's our breakdown of Brave Faces Everyone by Spanish Love Songs. Again, released February 7th, 2020. So celebrating a 5-year anniversary. Jared, where can people find you online?
The best place is probably Instagram of
Sure.
I'm Jay Freeze, but it's like fries, so it's confusing. JFRIES 13 on Instagram. I try to post a little bit of vinyl stuff that I'm listening to. There are some beer things related there because I'm a bit of a nerd. But yeah, Instagram and then I am on a podcast with a few
Yeah.
other guys that people may know because of Brock Dittus. He's quite well known in certain circles. But there's 4 of us that do that, and uh, it was a silly idea originally to piggyback off of Joe and Reese's Pickle and Boot Shop podcast. And it's kind of become an excuse to chat with some buddies that have formed over the internet across the country every week. And so we like it. If someone else does too, that always surprises me, and I'm appreciative. But
Yeah.
A Pickle Home Companions, that podcast.
Yep. And it's available on everywhere. Although I have found you guys are not on YouTube because I use YouTube Music. So I have to switch over to Spotify to listen to you guys' show.
I'll speak with Kevin, our editor, about that.
Yeah, it's I will say getting it hooked up to YouTube is the harder one. The
Is
rest
it?
of them is just RSS feed, and it does really
Yeah.
it's really easy. But like one of my the youth group show, every week I have to go to YouTube specifically and turn the episode from private to public. For some reason,
Really?
it won't do it. On the music show, the album anniversary one, it does it, but I have to do it. So there was a week I forgot, and I was like, and we don't get a ton of listens on YouTube, but I was like, why do we have 0? And I was like, oh, because
'Cause
it's
it's
just private and nobody can listen. Good job, me. So
Do you push the video there, or is it just the audio?
I don't do any video because I just don't have
I didn't know if you did. Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that is the only way to do podcasts in the future. Is they're now expect. I mean, Spotify is
Really?
pushing you to really everything should be video, and and I think the joke we made this on the youth group podcast. So and my co-host made it. Scott was like, Conan O'Brien is getting pushed. He's like, you shouldn't even be doing an audio one. It should only be video. And he's just like, so I'm just doing the dang show again. Like that's all.
Right.
You just got me back on a show. Why did you all take me off the air? You're telling me to go do this, but I've heard that's going to be the big push, is that if your podcast isn't video, it's going to be harder to sell. And I'm just like, I don't have time to edit all that crap. Like I don't have it in me. So
Who's watching? Because like
I agree.
that defeats to me, like that changes the whole consumption process.
Yep.
Because now I have to focus. I have to sit in a space,
Right.
or walk around with a phone, which I don't do. But I'm older, so like that's probably just me.
Right.
But I have been watching the videos of the Pickle and Boot Shop, but even that is like, this is way more inconvenient.
Oh yeah.
Because I have to
Yeah.
dedicate time to watching something versus
Yep.
like put it on my phone. I can put these headphones on and walk around the house and
Yep.
do whatever I need to do. So I find that strange. Like, who are
Yep.
these video podcast consumers?
Yeah. I
You've gotta be
can
watching on
barely
their
get
phone,
them in.
though, right?
I can barely get them in as it is. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know where I'll cut this. So it's possible if you want to hear us talk, you might just need to fast forward to the end, and it might be out there. There might be like a 40-minute outro here after the episode ends. And so if that's true, if you think like, oh my gosh, I still have another 45 minutes. No, we're actually ending the show here, and then you can go listen to that if you want. I don't know what I'm going to do with all this extra run. So, but anyway, I just want to say, Jared, thanks so much for coming on. This again, like I said at the beginning of the show, it's hard for me to find people sometimes to talk about some of these, outside of the CCM realm. And this is an album that I really wanted to talk about. So thanks so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate the invite. Glad I got to do this and to talk about this album as well. I love it. So thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah, I'm working on getting through all the Pickle and the Pickle Home Companion guys. I got to find Kevin's, my one I don't have scheduled. So I got to figure out an album to get him on the show for.
You got to get the Little Stranger ones. Might be his wheelhouse. He likes the out there stuff a little bit.
I'll have to message him, see what else he'd be interested in. Although I don't think I have anything strange left in a lot of 2025 is fairly boring. Anyway.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Album Anniversary Podcast. I want to say thanks again to Jared for joining me. After this ended, we ended up talking for like another 2 hours. So I'm going to maybe include some of that as outtakes or maybe a bonus episode. I didn't even record it all, but it was just great to talk with him. Clearly a great guy. And it was, again, I love talking about these albums, even if it's not something that means something to us in the sense that it's like this nostalgic album. Again, it's only been out 5 years, but just it was super cool to kind of see why he connected with this album. I felt a lot of those same things. And so thanks so much, Jared, for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. Let us know what you thought. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What are your favorites from this album? Again, you can find me on Twitter at Caleb the Spy, no spaces. I'm also on Instagram, Caleb the Spy with underscores in between the words. And you can email the show at Caleb the Spy Podcasts, that's with an S at the end, at gmail.com. And if you want to be on the show, that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is send me an email. I'll try and make something work. I do have a lot of guests lined up, but I'm always looking for different people to want to talk about albums. I have a list of albums I'm hoping to do this year. I'm looking to double up on some shows. I have people lined up, but maybe doing a couple people per episode. We'll see. But I'd love to get you at least included in the loop if you're interested. You can also follow me on Twitter. Occasionally I'll be looking for a guest for a show. I'll throw it out on Twitter and somebody can join. We try and make it work. Please subscribe and share the podcast if you're so inclined. Please leave a rating or review. I have heard it is an effective way to spread the word about podcasts. If you enjoy the show, you might also enjoy the other podcast I do with my friend Scott. It's called I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. It's not just a podcast where we reminisce about our youth and our youth group experience. But we're trying to interview fellow 90s and 2000s youth group kids and kind of hear where they're at now, whether they've left the faith entirely or they're still at the church they were raised at. We just want to hear their story and how that youth group experience has impacted their life. The music at the beginning and the end of the show is the instrumental version of the song Sing It Out at Street Level by Peg and the Rejected. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. So yeah, it's tough. The one I do on video, because he mostly does it on video, is Eric McClanahan's in Everglow show. But even then, I will just set up the video like in a room. So I'll just have my computer just running the video, and I'm not watching. I'm doing other things, and I occasionally I'm looking over at them, but like I'm doing other things while I have it on. So it just turns into that, but it makes the mechanism for delivery a little more tricky because I could do it on my phone too, but my phone would just be sitting there with a video running, which I don't love to do on my phone. So it's an interesting thing that they're pushing. I've heard there's a big push for you should be doing video, and I'm just like nobody wants to look at my face. I don't want to look at my face. What are you, nuts?
Well, that's a whole nother element of like paying attention to what you're doing,
right?
And like where you're looking, and because I'm sure you do it too. Like we have this set up with this Echo monitor just for like some work stuff.
Yeah.
So I have your outline, but it's all over there. So like, I'm looking over there. I'm not ignoring, but if you're watching it, why would you want to watch people who are like looking different? That doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. Like a show would be better at that point. You just want to show.
When it also just adds to this idea of like, I will say like, I think Brock makes the joke all the time. He's like, "Oh, you're a white guy in your 30s or 40s. You have a podcast, don't you?" Like, I think there is a sense of like, too, like you can't. it's just you can't do it. Like it is going to separate. Like every celebrity has a podcast now because they're just paying huge production fees. Where like I do 2 shows, and I'm very proud of. I've spent $140. I had to buy a microphone, but we pay for Zoom. That's it. Like I think that's a cool DIY accomplishment.
Yeah.
Like I kind of figured it all out how to do it on my own. I do it all on free software, except for we had to pay for Zoom because Zoom, they changed their policy on how many times you could restart your meeting. So they would do like, you can do 2, and then before the 3rd time you could restart it, you have to take a 10-minute break. And so it was like killing the conversations. I was like, crap, we got to just pay for this because I don't want to have to, you're down to the last 5 minutes. It's like, well, we got to get done. Otherwise we're going to have to take a 10-minute break. Like nobody wants that.
Oh,
so
no,
that's what forced us. But before that we did a solid 8 months of shows on free Zoom, free Audacity, free everything. And then I finally broke down and had to pay for it. So, but you can't do that if you're doing video. Like, nope. The costs go up immediately.
It's a whole nother level of,
Yep.
And I wonder who that's for. Is that like for, like celebrities, but that's a whole different like approach. Because everything I've heard, and we've even talked about it because we really didn't expect anybody to listen to us. And then like, we never intended to have anybody on, like it wasn't a goal. Like we didn't have a strategy period. We were just like, like ours started because Joe made the comment of like, we want to start a network of like other podcasts. If you're doing something, and I just DM'd those guys because we'd chatted so much online. I was like, hey, what if we like just took the discussion page to an actual conversation? That was like the whole, like, that was as much as there was to it of like, we'll just talk about their things. And, but then we started, and then like Jason Jason asked us to join like from Unoriginal Vinyl. And that like blew me away. I was like, what? Like how'd you listen? Number one, like, what are you doing? Like, what? I'm so confused because we're like niche of a niche. They have like 500 people, so we're gonna drop that thing down. But from what I've heard about it is like most people, if they start one that don't have status to attract people from the beginning, like their name, like it takes a while to get traction. Like most of the ones that have like taken off put in the work for a really long time, cultivating kind of a community. And I think even like the CCM Twitter, that's the other thing I've heard is like, if you've been active in communities, so you have credibility, even if you don't have like, you're not famous, but you have credibility with people who care about whatever it is you're talking about because you've participated for, you're not just a taker, you're a contributor, basically. Like if you've been contributing to people who care about something, you have a chance if you're consistent and you keep putting out content and people will give you a shot. But I was shocked when I heard like most podcasts end within 2 episodes, like some crazy
10,
number.
It's 10. The 10 episodes is like most podcasts don't make it past 10. And I think it is. So to the video thing, I think it's a bit of vanity because there is I will say it, like there's a bit of vanity to, I do a podcast because I want people to listen to my opinion. Like I can't play the card of like, I don't want to be famous. Like, no, I do.
It'd be cool if people listen. Yeah.
Like I hope people listen. I'm just going to say it. Like, I want people to listen to my stupid show. Like, there is some vanity. And I think the video almost takes it to that next level of vanity where it's like, there's some of that. And like, and you're right. Like, I think it's also because it's the celebrity nature of podcasts now. Like, you're right. Like, I feel really proud that, oh man, this is gonna sound so arrogant. I am very proud that anybody listens to my show because like I am not famous. My buddy is not famous that we do the show with. So I've started 2 podcasts in the last year that have, I'm not pulling in crazy numbers, but people are listening. People are engaging. I get comments that like, oh, I enjoyed that episode. And it's not every episode. Like, this episode, I'll be honest, like, this is an album I wanted to talk about. There's unless we get picked up by something like, probably less people listen than to, the Newsboys albums, because there's the nostalgia aspect of it. But for me, I want to have that like I've talked about this with somebody, like I want the variety. I want the variety of guests. I think people coming on and saying why they love something is really engaging and interesting. Like I'd
Yeah.
rather hear that than sometimes like, especially like, and there's a spot I there was a podcast that I had checked out a little of it and it was like, oh, this is okay. And then I got to one of their episodes and it was just them crapping all over this artist, the whole
Oh.
thing. Like it started with like, is this even music? And it just went downhill from there. And
Mm,
it was, it was a band that you may do a spin-off podcast for, one of the hosts for. It just felt like, what is this? Like what gives you joy? Like there's a difference between
right.
being critical but still generous. Like, yep, this didn't work for me. Here's why I don't like it. And then there's just crapping on somebody for the sake of
Right.
crapping on somebody, especially something that came out 20 years ago. Like
Right.
and so like I don't know, there's something about that aspect that I don't want to do it. So like I'm proud that non-famous guy, and you're right, like even if you've got a huge community following, like the numbers drop because there's an investment. Like somebody has to give
Mhm.
this going to run an hour and a half. Like somebody's got to give an hour and a
Right.
half to their lives to listen to it. And so I appreciate every last person who listens, because it's pretty amazing that anybody does it all. And I don't expect people to listen to every episode, because sometimes, yeah, they're going to get to an album and it's like, not really for me. Like the
Mhm.
Rancid one I did last year. I love that album. Or I love that
Yeah.
episode. And I knew it was gonna not be a winner with a lot of people, but it is what it is. So yeah, it's a weird thing of like trying to be. I'm trying to think about marketing, but I'm also just kind of having to let it go and be like, no, this is for fun, and as long as viewership is ticking up, I will keep on doing this unless I just feel like I
Right.
can't do it anymore. Or my wife tells me it's time to stop, which could happen
Yeah.
because it does
I
take a fair
understand.
amount of my time. But yeah,
Well, but that's how I feel about it. Of like, it doesn't. I'm not doing where we like our little one. Like, we're not paying any bills.
yeah,
So
yep,
if we don't find it fun, it's a waste of time
yep,
because time is valuable. But there's like this balance of I don't want to focus like we've really not talked about like and like I don't hardly anybody follows on Instagram or anything like that. Like we haven't
yeah,
done we're not working very hard on any of that, which is fine. Like it's one of those like what I've said is like I don't care who's listening, not because I don't care about people. Like I'm generally kind of baffled and appreciative when
yeah,
someone chooses to listen. So it's not dismissive. It's just like it's not a goal or a driving strategy or a factor. Like we don't really like every now and then Kevin will tell us how many people or like what the downloads are. I'm like, oh wow, that's surprising. Like more than I thought. Someone
right,
in Norway. How about that? And but what I'm trying to figure out how to balance is it's like when Reese joined us, that became the most downloaded one.
yeah,
And it was like I appreciate the value of the people who have a lot of people who care about them, but I don't want to ever get to a place where like my goal is to monopolize that. But
right,
there's some level like we'll have the conversation and be like, oh, like more people are going to listen to us because Reese
yeah,
Roper, like people care about Reese Roper, like
yep,
which is perfect. And like the one tomorrow is coming out with Jeff Fortson from Squad, and Jeff has been like posting on his Instagram, and which is cool. Like he's been into
yeah,
it. And it's like, but our conversation, especially like this is me personally, I'm hoping more people listen because if more people listen, we can convince more people to talk to us. And I just want to talk to more people. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like ultimately. I don't want to be successful for just the mere like I'm trying to be a podcaster. That's not the goal. Is like I can't believe I ever had a conversation with Reese Roper and drank bourbon. I mean,
right,
we've been giddy over it ourselves, like when we try to act a little more put together in front of people, but like outside of people, high fiving of like, oh my God, 17-year-old homeschooled pastor's kid, insecure, who Five Iron Frenzy was their favorite band, could never have comprehended I would drink bourbon with this guy. And I can't believe because we did this silly little thing that it afforded that opportunity. Or like to talk to Jeff or Jason. Like,
Yeah.
and we've talked to Adam from Cody Hook. We're talking to Jeff from 90 Pound Wuss. And like these, all of a sudden, like it turns out if you ask people, they'll say yes. Like way easier than I expected.
Right.
Because, if you were semi-popular 20 years ago, you're not getting a lot of demands right now.
Right.
But it's to me, it's like not about the success of the podcast. So like these are this art was formative to me. It
Yeah.
mattered. I appreciate these people, even if they're kind of my age. And so it's not a fanboy out, but I want to express my appreciation for like, no, like what you made. I know it mattered to a lot of people. It mattered to me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to tell you individually.
Yeah.
And so I'll do this for a long time, and even like we record on Tuesday nights. It's like I get to talk to Pete, Kevin, and Brock on Tuesdays, and we have so much in common that I don't have with my neighbors literally down the street.
Right.
If no one listens, and I saw a meme where it was like a Instagram reel or something, but it was like a guy doing a podcast interview, and at the end he's like, "I got to be honest, man, I don't even have a podcast. These mics aren't plugged into anything." They were like on the deck. He's like, "I just didn't know how to ask another adult man how to have a serious conversation." And that
Right.
was the whole joke is like, it's the only way men can become friends in their 40s or whatever is to like have them on their podcast because then they'll talk for 2 hours about something serious.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I feel that because
Yeah.
kind of true. So like having the chance to talk with you and just like little interactions online, there's all like we already rehashed this, but shared experience.
Yep.
But I found that experience is online. It's not in my neighborhood.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'm really appreciative of all of these things of like to connect with these people, have these conversations, and like it just to grow the number of people that have something in common is a lot of whether it's successful, whatever that means, of like
Yeah.
if you're not getting paid,
Yep.
whatever success is, like it's cool to have new friendships, connections, people to chat with, to talk about that I'm
Yeah.
not going to find right where I'm located.
Yeah.
I'm in rural North Carolina. Like we don't agree on much, me and my neighbors.
We'll see if AJ makes it this far into the show, and he always tweets me when he gets a shout out on a show. But like he makes the joke about go talk to your internet friends. Like my wife will occasionally be like, "That's great, honey. I'm glad you're really excited about this. Go talk to your internet friends about it." But like
Yep.
that is this is what this has become for me. This music one
Yeah.
especially is like it's kind of this like just chance to talk to people about music that like I've got a problem when it comes to Five Iron. Like I posted the picture on when Until It Shakes Apart comes out. I have that thing on vinyl twice, and I didn't even get into vinyl till the box set came out.
Oh
So
wow.
I have two vinyl copies. I have a CD copy, and I gave away a CD copies. I bought that stinking album physically 4 times
Nice.
because I've got a problem.